This is WEFT Champaign, 90.1 FM, community radio for East Central Illinois, streaming live at www.weft.org. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Weekend Heartbeat, a series of shows that represent a collective effort to bring the thoughts and actions of people working in the nonprofit arena to the forefront, where it needs to be. Join us each Saturday at this time to enjoy a different episode in this series. Upcoming shows will include Joy George, the first Saturday of each month, hosting Peace Talks Radio, which talks about the personal conflicts we face every day and ways we may effectively deal with these challenges. Also in this series is Doug Olive, the third Saturday of each month, who will be hosting Speaking of Democracy, which takes a look at political theory and its sociology. Another in this series is Pause Radio on the fourth Saturday of each month, which is an informative program on the care and well-being of our companion animals. Today's show, A New Lamp, features Marilyn Rickey and Sean David, who will be bringing an informative light to the Baha'i faith and its philosophy. The views and opinions expressed here are those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent those of WEFT, its board of directors, associates, station manager, or Prairie Air Incorporated. The following program is pre-recorded and consists of two parts. The first part is a rebroadcast of a program first aired in 2011. The second part was recorded on March 29th, 2015. Welcome to Weekend Heartbeat. I'm Sean David, and this is A New Lamp.
New lamp for old, new lamp for old. Remember how Aladdin headed out to get oil for his mother's old dented, tarnished lamp? And in the market he met a magician calling out these words. This strange man was offering to give him a brand new shiny lamp for his old one. That's what I want to offer you, if you'll have it. A new lamp of spiritual guidance. But maybe you already have such a lamp, which still burns brightly. Great! You are still welcome to join us simply to learn who we are. But maybe your lamp of divine guidance has gotten dented and tarnished like Aladdin's. Or perhaps you have no such lamp at all. To you, I offer a new lamp. Hi, my name is Marilyn. Welcome to A New Lamp, a program designed to make you acquainted with the Baha'i religious faith. I hope you will choose to spend the next few minutes with me. Thanks.
Was in the sea, our child, dark surrounded him. A heavenly maiden did appear, light on every limb. She said, this is the mystery of God and his treasure. This is the mystery of God and his treasure. He was bowed down by chains, strangers at his side. Highwaymen surrounded him, some companions died. This is the mystery of God and his treasure. This is the mystery of God and his treasure. After he came saying, free the prisoner, you treat him like a criminal. He is Baha'u'llah. This is the mystery of God and his treasure. This is the mystery of God and his treasure. My God, this is the best beloved of the world, and yet you comprehend not. Pestilence, he heard a most sweet voice calling above his head. Turning his face, she said, this is the mystery of God and his treasure. This is the mystery of God and his treasure. My God, this is the best beloved of the world, and yet you comprehend not. My God, this is the best beloved of the world, and yet you comprehend not.
Good morning. We ended our program last week with Baha'u'llah in the dungeon. I'm going to read to you his own words, which will give you a better idea of the extreme circumstances than I could give you in my words. It was while in the Shia Kal that Baha'u'llah came to understand that he was the one referred to by the Bab as he whom God will make manifest. Upon our arrival, we were first conducted along a pitch-black corridor, from whence we descended 3 steep flights of stairs to the place of confinement assigned to us. The dungeon was wrapped in thick darkness, and our fellow prisoners numbered nearly 150 souls, thieves, assassins, and highwaymen. Though crowded, it had no other outlet than the passage by which we entered. No pen can depict that place, nor any tongue describe its loathsome smell. Most of these men had neither clothes nor bedding to lie on. God alone knoweth what befell us in that most foul-smelling and gloomy place. All those who were struck down by the storm that raged during the memorable year in Tehran were our fellow prisoners in the Shia Kal, where we were confined. We were all huddled together in one cell, our feet in stocks, and around our necks fastened the most galling of chains. The air we breathed was laden with the foulest impurities, while the floor on which we sat was covered with filth and infested with vermin. No ray of light was allowed to penetrate that pestilential dungeon, or to warm its icy coldness. We were placed in 2 rows facing each other. We had taught them to repeat certain verses which, every night, they chanted with extreme fervor. God is sufficient unto me, he verily is the all-sufficing, one row would intone, while the other would reply, in him let the trusting trust. The chorus of these gladsome voices would continue to peal out until early morning hours. Every day our jailers, entering our cell, would call the name of one of our companions, bidding him arise and follow them to the foot of the gallows. With what eagerness would the owner of that name respond to that solemn call! Relieved of his chains, he would spring up to his feet, and in a state of uncontrollable delight would approach and embrace us. We would seek to comfort him with the assurance of an everlasting life in the world beyond, and filling his heart with hope and joy, would send him forth to win the crown of glory. He would embrace, in turn, the rest of his fellow prisoners, and then proceed to die as dauntlessly as he had lived. Soon after the martyrdom of each of these companions, we would be informed by the executioner, who had grown to be friendly to us, of the circumstances of the death of his victim, and of the joy with which he had endured his sufferings to the very end. O my servant, free thyself from the fetters of the world, and loose thy soul from the prison of self. Seize thy chance, for it will come to thee no more. Thanks so much for being with me this morning. I hope you have found a blessing during these few minutes. If you want to learn more about the Baha'i religion, you can go online to www.bahai.us. To contact me, my email address is anewlamp@yahoo.com. Thanks, and have a great day. Good afternoon. Our guest today is Marge Wilson. She is a member of the Baha'i community in Urbana, and she has been for years a pioneer for the Baha'i faith. Hi, Marge. Welcome to our program.
Hi, Marilyn. Thank you for inviting me. And Sean, too. Hi.
Hi, Marge.
Okay. Well, Marge, I've known you've worked for many years teaching the faith, not only locally, but kind of around the world. And we want to hear about that. But first of all, let's get to know you a little bit, like who you are, a little about your family, whatever you think.
Okay, well, I grew up in Urbana. My dad was at the University of Illinois, although he worked for the USDA studying corn, taught a few grad students now and then. And I graduated from Urbana High School and then Illinois State University. When I was in high school, my dad taught an interdenominational Sunday school, which visited a number of places of worship, including the old Baha'i Center at the Garita Busey home. I don't remember it, but many years later, when I did declare my faith in Baha'u'llah, Dad reminded me that we actually had gone to the Baha'i Center when I was in high school.
Huh.
So I wanted to leave Illinois, so I moved out to Montana and eventually got a job teaching on the Blackfeet Reservation, where there was a Homefront pioneer who was trying to find some of the Blackfeet Baha'is, and he really lived the life. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he didn't party, and I was very attracted to this. And eventually I ran into some other Baha'is who gave me some books to read, and when I went to summer school in Missoula, Montana that summer, I declared my faith in Baha'u'llah. I was basically what's called a Homefront pioneer. I'll talk about that in a minute. From the time I declared, because I was living on the reservation, and then a year later I moved to Lesotho. I've lived in Hawaii, Alaska, China, and I just like traveling around, teaching in many different countries and different places.
Wow. That's quite a history. So you were already teaching elsewhere, just at a personal level, not as a Baha'i teacher.
Yes, I'm a special education teacher.
Okay.
Except when I'm in other countries, then I teach. In China, I taught English language. When I went to Lesotho, I taught everything. The foreign teachers there taught everything but English. I taught math, science, and art.
Now I'm going to show my ignorance. Where is Lesotho?
Lesotho is a little country surrounded by South Africa.
Oh.
And this was during the end of apartheid.
Okay.
So it was really interesting because in South Africa, there were some people who were really racist. And
yes.
It was hard to believe some of them. But the Basotho were just wonderful people. I used to hike and backpack and take the bus and hitchhike all over the country. And everyone I met was wonderful.
Wow. That's really great. So Well, I know that we have pioneers and we have traveling teachers. Is that right?
Yes.
And you refer to yourself as a
Homefront
homefront pioneer. Okay. Can you explain the difference in these designations?
Okay, a traveling teacher goes to another place or another country for a limited period of time. It could be just for a few weeks or a few months.
Okay.
And during that time, they may teach the faith. They may just visit friends in remote areas. They may teach Rui classes on spirituality and how to live and teach as a spiritual being.
Mm-hmm.
And there are two kinds of pioneers. There are homefront and international pioneers. Homefront pioneers move from one place in their own country to another place where there are few or no Baha'is. So, for example, in Montana, a cowboy moved out to Montana, and he and his mother were homefront pioneers for the state of Montana. They were the first Baha'is out there.
Wow.
And an international pioneer, of course, goes to another country. And I think they should stay for at least 6 months. Pioneers are expected to be self-supporting.
Okay.
In almost all cases. There are a few cases in some countries where foreigners can't get jobs, and then they can accept money from outside. But usually Baha'i pioneers have some sort of job to support themselves while they're in the country.
It's not the same as a Christian missionary being supported by the church going someplace. But
No.
you need to have some sort of profession that you're able to maintain.
Yeah, most pioneers
Right.
have a profession.
Right.
And many of them try to be in service professions like teaching, medicine, and so on. So they establish, some Baha'is have set up schools or hospitals or clinics, especially in remote areas.
Yes.
In Iran, some of the best schools many, many years ago were run by Baha'is. But unfortunately, they got shut down because they were run by Baha'is.
So, do you have any special stories you want to tell us about any of these places?
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the power of prayer. And in Lesotho, I discovered how powerful certain prayers were. One time on my birthday, which is July 10th, which is in the winter in Lesotho, I was on a trip going all the way around the country, visiting the Baha'is in the villages and some of the remote areas. And I got on a bus that went down the hill and probably had 2 flat tires and only 1 spare. So a bunch of us got off and started hitchhiking. We got caught in a snowstorm. And of course, Lesotho do not have snow tires. And it was a gravel road, and we had to get out and push. So I started saying a short prayer called the Remover of Difficulties, and we never had to get out and push after I said that.
Wow.
Another time in Montana was kind of funny. I was going on a winter camping trip in Yellowstone, and I'd been following bison tracks, and I was planning to take a loop, one of the scenic loops around a geyser field, and there's a little picnic area where I planned to eat lunch. Well, I got up above the river and looked down, and there was a herd of bison going across the bridge toward the picnic area, so I decided I would have a picnic on this side of the river, sitting on a log. And eventually the bison moved off, and so I cautiously skied down the hill and across the bridge, and the bison didn't pay attention to me. And there's another herd, 11 bison, quite a bit farther than these bison. And I'm going along with a 65-pound pack on my back.
Oh, my
and,
gosh.
well, I didn't weigh it.
But it felt
It
like
felt
Felt
like,
like
yes,
that.
it was very heavy. And all of a sudden, one of the bison started running toward me. And then the whole herd started running toward me. And I knew, even if I didn't have the pack, I couldn't outrun a bison. So I said a very short prayer, Ya Baha'u'llah Pa, thou the glory of glories. And the first bison started swerving, and then the whole herd started swerving, and they started slowing down, and I kept saying, Ya Baha'u'llah Pa, Ya Baha'u'llah Pa. By the time they reached the road, they were behind me, and they stopped and started grazing, and I said, okay, bison, you go that way, I'm going this way.
So you do believe in the
Yes,
power
I
of
do
prayer?
believe.
Power of prayer.
Yes, that one worked really well.
Yes, you've been in the kind of circumstances that are uniquely different.
Well, at one time, I was even the answer to somebody's prayer. I was on pilgrimage and decided on our day off to go to the Baha'i cemetery. And I got down there and found one of the Persian Baha'is there. And she said, I didn't really feel comfortable going into the cemetery by myself, so I prayed to Baha'u'llah to send another Baha'i.
Oh,
And
and
there you are.
There you are.
And it turned out to be a real blessing because she could read the tombstones that were written in Persian and tell me
Yes.
who was there. And I could explain to her the English ones. Wow. So it was a bounty and a blessing for both of
For
us.
both of you. Pilgrimage, I think, is something. Have we ever talked about pilgrimage?
We mentioned the Holy Land, but I don't think we talked about the sort of the
What pilgrimage is.
what pilgrimage is in terms of the practices.
Would you like to talk a little bit about pilgrimage?
Well, pilgrimage today is spending 9 days in the Holy Land, in Israel, visiting the sites where Baha'u'llah and his son Abdu'l-Baha lived, which include Baji, Akka, and Akka mainly. There are some other places too. We also visit the World Center of the Faith, have tours of the Universal House of Justice building, and spend time at the archives where we have the bounty of seeing the photograph of Baha'u'llah, as well as things that he actually owned, locks of his hair, his rings, some of his robes. And it's just a wonderful time of being very uplifted and just being with other Baha'is and learning and seeing where the history of the faith took
Yes.
place.
And it's really an amazing thing. You think about it, of all the religions and messengers of God that have been in the world, we are the only ones who can actually go and see a picture of the messenger for our day, Baha'u'llah, and as you said, these things that were part of him. And that is just a real bounty right there. Just unbelievable,
And the Baha'is are also praying for world peace, because one of the benefits for us is that we will be able to go on what is the real pilgrimage and visit these scenes of Baha'u'llah's life in Iran and Iraq that are close to Baha'is at this time.
Right.
Because the Holy Land is in Israel, right? In Haifa.
Yes.
Yeah.
Haifa and Akka are the two main places where Baha'u'llah lived.
Mm-hmm. And a very interesting thing, Israel, we've always referred to it as the Holy Land before Baha'is were ever there, because that has been the birthplace of the Jewish nation, of the Christian nation. It's important to Islam, and now to us. We're kind of on the other side of the country from Jerusalem, so we're kind of not impinging on the other folks there.
Yeah, but we're the House of Justice and the gardens are all on Mount Carmel, which of course is very important in the scriptures of all the other religions.
Right. Yes, we have talked before about. I think it was last time, wasn't it, that Michael played for us the
Right.
The song "Queen of Carmel," which is the Shrine of the Bab. Well, let's see. What else? What other kind of stories have you got to tell us, Marge? I know you've got tons.
Oh,
of
yes, I've got tons of stories. Well, when I lived in China, the second time I lived in China, I lived in a big neighborhood, which was all Chinese. I think there was one other person there, one other American who lived there, who was also a Baha'i friend of mine from earlier time in China. And I was asked to teach an English class weekly English class in my neighborhood for about 3 months. And it was open to anybody who wanted to learn English. So I wound up with 20-some people aged 5 to in their 50s.
My.
And it was so much fun. I just continued it. It went for more than 2.5 years until I finally left town, or 3. I think it was close to 3 years when I finally moved, and I made a lot of friends there. I got a children's class, and we learned about service. And on Earth Day, we went out and cleaned up the neighborhood park. There was a hill that had been used as kind of as a dump for a long time. So the first time we had a lot of garbage bags full of stuff. The next year was much nicer. There wasn't nearly as much stuff so that was one of the things we did as a service project.
Wow. Well, once you clean something up, people start taking note and doing it themselves. So you were teaching English. Does this mean that you speak Chinese?
No. Most of the people I met wanted to practice their English, and I thought, well, I'm an English teacher. I'll practice English with them. I did study Chinese for a semester at a university in northern China, but unfortunately they taught using the old-fashioned technique of rote memorization.
Right.
And I didn't learn well that way.
Okay.
So I knew enough Chinese that I could get by. I could, find out, buy things, especially in the markets. I could buy tickets on the train or the bus or the boat or whatever. I did study Chinese calligraphy, which is learning to write the traditional characters, which turned out to be a real advantage when I was traveling, especially by train, because there would be this huge sign with dozens of different cities listed on it. And before I took calligraphy, I would look at my phrase book or wherever I had the name of my destination, and then I'd look up and I could look at about 3 or 4 characters and look down and then look up, and my head was going up and down, up and down. But once I started learning the characters, I could remember the characters for the name of my next destination. I could look up at the whole sign and find it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or when I'm walking down a row of buses, oh yes, that bus is going to where I want to go.
So you were, as a Baha'i, in China. Were there problems about that? This being a communist country, were you essentially welcome there, or how was the attitude?
Well, foreigners were welcomed as teachers, especially, and as business people, because the Chinese really wanted to learn English, especially with the Olympics coming up. That was when they really wanted to learn English. But especially my first 2 years, almost 20 years ago, in the teacher's contract, there were these stipulations that you do not talk about religion.
Okay.
In the teacher's contract.
Yes.
So we Baha'is abide by the laws of the country.
Right. But principles are something you could teach.
Yes.
Equality and this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell them that you were a Baha'i? Could you tell your students?
I could tell them that I was a Baha'i. I could have a picture of Abdu'l-Baha and some Baha'i symbols up on my walls in my apartment. And if people asked about them, I could tell them about them.
But just not officially teach it.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's been opening up, because I mentioned the Rui books on spirituality. Originally, the pioneers were allowed to meet with no more than 5 Chinese to study these books, and then it's opened up so that the classes can be bigger. A number of years ago, the Baha'is were told in several big cities that they were going to have meetings open only to foreigners once a week. And the Baha'is said, well, this isn't legal. And the government said, well, we want you will do this. and the Baha'i said, well, we don't limit our meetings to just, one nationality. We would meet with Chinese. No, you can't do that, but we want you to have meetings for foreigners. The idea is that China was starting to open up to some other religions, because only Christianity, I think Judaism, Catholicism, Protestants, and Islam and Buddhism were the recognized religions in China. Okay. So they opened it up to these 10 other smaller religions, with the idea that if it worked, then they could open things up a little bit more. If it didn't work, it would shut down. You're sorry, it's illegal. You can't do this anymore.
That's interesting.
Which is the way the Chinese do things. So it worked. So they started opening up a little more and a little more. Then the Baha'is could have their Chinese spouses attend the meetings.
Now, we have a family from Champaign-Urbana in China now, don't we? The Baker family. We'll be interested to hear from them when they come home on, I think during the summer, to hear what's going on from them. It'll be interesting to compare
Yes.
with what you've
Yeah,
learned.
well, China is really opening up because when I first went to China, the foreign teachers and foreign students at my first university were in the same building. We were locked in at night. And any Chinese who wanted to visit us had to show their ID in case the police wanted to see who was going to visit foreigners.
Really?
And my only friends were the Y-bonds, the people from the university who were supposed to work with the foreigners. One or two of the professors, my students, and my Taiji group. And then when I went back in the late 90s, it was like China was a totally different country because I was living in a neighborhood, a Chinese neighborhood. You know, there are no locks on the doors. My friends were my neighbors, the other English teachers at my high school, my Taiji group, of course, and
So your first time you were almost a prisoner.
yes. Well, we still had a lot of freedom, but it was very difficult. For example, at my second university, the university owned one end of a 7-story apartment building, and our end was walled off from the rest of the building.
Oh.
So if we wanted to visit somebody in the apartment next door, we would have had to go out the gate, walk a block down to the end of the street, come back in, walk a block back. So it was very difficult to make friends because you couldn't meet your neighbors.
Yeah. Comparing it to Japan, which is, of course, a much more open society. But I guess the thing for me that compares is it's called Kansai Gaidai. It was the name of the school. And they had this international school that was set aside just for the study abroad students. I found out that the students at Kansai Gaidai, the Japanese students, they used to refer to that school, that college for the foreigners, they used to refer to it colloquially as the zoo because it was where the foreigners were. And so that's what you mentioned, the idea of them sort of keeping you there in this cage. You're kind of, oh, it's a zoo. It's just like Kansai Gaidai.
Yeah. Well, I got some of that, especially when I was practicing Taiji in the morning, because it seemed like every day somebody would come by and look at me and yell, "Lawai!" which is the less polite word for foreigner, or "Waigoren," which is the more polite word. One time, I even saw a mother taking her toddler's hand to point at me to say,
Really?
"Waigoren." I want to.
And of course, you're rather tall, and the Chinese are not all that tall. So I suppose you kind of stood out in the crowd.
Oh, yes. Oh, there's another. I found out where I stood in the events of things when I was on a bike trip. I stopped in a small city, I don't know, probably 500,000 or so, and decided to go into a department store to see if they had anything that looked good to eat. So I locked my bike up, and there was a man who had 2 monkeys, and there's this big crowd of people standing around the man and watching the 2 monkeys performing, and I went into the store and bought a couple items and walked out the door, and all of a sudden I was in the big crowd of people, and there was only a handful of people watching the monkeys.
Right. Well, of course, this is radio, but you're not only are you tall, you're also blonde. So that must have really stood out.
Oh, yes. Well, in Lesotho, too, I've got fairly hairy arms and hairy legs, and people would come over and sort of pet my arms in Lesotho. And a few times, women would come up behind me and pull out hairs as if they thought I wasn't going to notice them pulling hairs out of the back of my head. And one time on a bus, I was sitting behind a mother who had a little baby on her shoulder, and the baby just started screaming when he saw me, and the mother kept trying to pull the baby down so he couldn't see me, and the baby kept climbing up and looking at me and screaming, and I finally had got out of my seat and moved to the back of the bus and stood so the baby couldn't see me anymore.
Wow.
This was in Lesotho?
This was in Lesotho.
Oh.
Yeah, traveling by bus in Lesotho was very interesting.
Wow. I'm going to back up a little bit. Your first experience as in teaching, you said, was in Montana, and this was before you were a Baha'i. This is
Yes.
where you found the faith, apparently. Now, the person you mentioned, I believe, someone who was an Indian.
Well, actually, the one who started teaching me the faith was a homefront pioneer, and he was
Okay.
Caucasian. A number of years before, they'd had a big project where Baha'is had gone up to the Blackfeet Reservation and taught a number of people the faith, but then they left. And unfortunately, there was a really bad car accident a year or so later, and quite a few people were killed, including many of these new Baha'is. And unfortunately, the Baha'is from other places in Montana did not go back to help them out during this time.
Oh,
And
dear.
the people basically left the faith or became inactive. So this homefront pioneer was trying to find these people who had declared themselves as Baha'is some
Yes.
years earlier but had been inactive.
I understand that throughout our country, many Native Americans have become Baha'i. Apparently, this somehow fits into their spiritual understandings. And I think that's a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is.
Can you tell us a little about that? I mean, I know only that my personal understanding is that there are Indian beliefs that dovetail with Baha'i beliefs, or at least prophetically, but I really know little more than that. Do you know anything more than that?
Well, I went back and reread Black Elk Speaks, which is a book about a shaman who lived during the time of the end of the free roaming Plains Indians and the beginning of the reservation time. And a lot of the things he saw in his visions were, he saw visions of peace, he saw visions of multiracial people together, working together to build a better world. And his greatest sorrow was that he felt he never had done enough to try and bring this about.
That is interesting. And at this time, do we not have a Native American woman on the National Spiritual Assembly?
Oh.
Yes, we do.
Yes. I can't think of what her name is.
Patricia
but-
Locke.
Oh, okay. Forgive me if you already spoke about this, but so Marge, I was curious. What attracted you to the faith when you read the books that were given to you? What was it that attracted you personally? What was it that struck you?
Well, I had been searching for something for a long time. I remember visiting the Mormon Tabernacle and thinking that was really wonderful. And I'd started reading the holy books. I read the Bible in college and asked some questions, and I wasn't really satisfied with the answers. I remember seeing a Christian musical group performing, and I could just see this love and this, they believed, and it looked so wonderful. And when I started reading the Baha'i books, the Hidden Words, and I think Gleanings was another one, Gleanings from the Writings of Baha'u'llah was another early one I read, I realized that these teachings were sinking into my heart.
Yes.
And I just kept reading, and finally went down to Missoula and got my friend was there, and he hooked me up with the Baha'is, and I had a very strange experience because they kept asking me what I believed, and at that point I wasn't quite sure what I believed. Actually, at that point they hadn't sunk into my heart yet. I agreed with them. Yes, these are very nice, but I'm not quite ready yet. And I remember my body was physically getting stiff because they were asking what I believed, and I knew I really didn't believe, and we walked back to the dorms where we were staying, and I just felt really strange. And that night I was pounding on my pillow saying, Baha'u'llah, let me in. I'm knocking on the door, let me in. And then the next day when I started reading the writings, that was when they really started sinking into my heart. So a few days at the end of the week, I went back and said, I want to be a Baha'i. And Baha'i said, are you sure?
I've never heard anybody quite so demanding. That is so wonderful, Marge.
Well, my spiritual father had an even more demanding one. I heard in his community they were taping the Baha'is and asking them how they had become Baha'is, and he had learned about the faith, but he was also had some serious problems in his life, and he was suicidal. And at one point, he got out his firearm and aimed at his head and basically said, it's Baha'u'llah or I'm going to kill myself. And Baha'u'llah, something stopped him. His desperate prayer stopped him, and he became a Baha'i.
Wow. Yes, as we talk to or meet different people, which is much of why we ask this question of people, how'd you become Baha'i? It's interesting, all the different stories that we have. It's not just kind of like, well, I saw it, those seemed like good principles, and I decided that was good. It's like so many of us who have come from outside. Sean, you were raised with the Baha'i religion. But the rest of us is like, yes, there's a seeking for something, we're not finding it. And so it's really intriguing to hear these different stories.
I could tell a story I heard about a Sioux from, I believe it was the Rosebud Reservation back, it must have been 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Anyway, he and his family went out to Washington or Northern Oregon to visit some friends. And while he was there, he had a dream that he was going to hear that they were getting ready to go home, and he had a dream that a dark cloud was going to follow him home, and then he was going to hear about a new messenger of God who came from the east. Well, a couple days later, they set out in their car, and Mount St. Helens erupted.
Oh, wow.
And they were followed by a dark cloud all the way back to Wyoming.
I guess.
Wow.
And a couple of weeks later, a couple of people knocked on their door and said, we're Baha'is. Have you heard about the Baha'i faith? And he asked one question, where did it come from? And Baha'u'llah came from Persia, from Iran, from the east. And he said, okay, I'm a Baha'i.
Oh, my.
Oh, man.
Because that was his dream.
Wow.
Wow. That was really wonderful stories. Wonderful stories.
Well, Marge, I guess one thing that's interesting to me, because I don't know if you know much about this program, we're on WEFT Radio, and the program that we're a part of is called the Heartbeat Collective. It's a group of shows that are talking about the social service arena and the nonprofit arena, especially here locally in Champaign-Urbana. So for that reason, a lot of the questions we've been asking our previous guests have focused a lot on their social service and nonprofit activities. But so that means that, being as the Baha'i faith is a religion, and we do have these spiritual aspects, and you've mentioned many of your spiritual experiences so far. It's curious to me how, because of the circumstances of your experience, even though you are part of a lot of social and community development activity, and all of your travels have had that in mind with the upliftment of humankind, there is also this strong spiritual thread and a lot of emphasis on prayer and other very religious and spiritual experiences. I was wondering if you could comment a little bit about that intersection in your experience between the religion and spirituality and the social service and social development and improvement of the material condition of mankind.
Okay, well, I'd like to go back and talk a little bit about the history of the Baha'i faith, and because that leads into the administration of the faith. In 1863, Baha'u'llah and his family had been exiled to Iraq and to Baghdad, and in 1863 they were going to be further exiled, and this was, everybody thought would be a time of sorrow. Baha'u'llah was leaving, but instead it became a time of triumph. He left his home on a roan stallion, surrounded by devoted friends and neighbors. He took a boat across the river to a garden which is now called Rizwan, which means paradise. And there he met with friends, dignitaries, and others for 12 days. And we could now call these the 12 days of Rizwan. 3 of the days are considered holy days when work is suspended. The first day when Baha'u'llah went to the garden, the 9th day when most of his family joined him, and then the 12th day when he finally left. And on the first day of Rizwan, Baha'i communities elect their local spiritual assemblies. These are 9 people who are elected through prayer. There's no electioneering, there's no talking about who you're going to vote for, and there's no voting for particular positions. We do not vote for somebody for chairman, secretary, or treasurer. We vote for 9 people, and we pray about it and write down the names of the 9 people that we think are both spiritually and, I guess you'd say, materially prepared to serve as members of the local spiritual assembly or the national spiritual assembly. And then the 9 members themselves vote for chairperson, secretary, treasurer, and
Right.
whatever officers
Yeah.
they have. So normally the spiritual assemblies are elected on the first day of Rizwan, which is April 21st. But in Lesotho, when I was there more than 20 years ago, many of the Baha'is were not well deepened. They didn't know much about the local spiritual assemblies and how important it was to elect them on the 21st of April. So at one point, I was told to help elect some local spiritual assemblies way back in the mountains and remote areas in the winter, which was July. So there was a village that had a local spiritual assembly, and I went over the mountains to visit the Baha'is in the other 2 villages, and I found a couple of Baha'is in each of the villages and talked to them about the election and the importance of having a governing body for the Baha'is in their village so that they could do service projects and whatever they needed to do. And I barely made it back to the big village before dark. And I started thinking every other election I had helped run had a tie vote. And my Sesotho was barely adequate to describe how to elect a local spiritual assembly. And I had problems trying to explain tie votes. And so the next morning, I looked at the weather and decided it's not going to snow, so I can wear my running shoes instead of my big heavy hiking boots. And I started to say prayers on the way up that I would not have to have a tie. And I got to the 2 villages, and those were the only 2 Baha'i elections that I've ever helped with that did not have a tie vote.
Really?
And I did make it back to the village before it got dark, just barely.
Once
I
again,
made it.
prayer got you through.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, we're talking about Rizwan, which is coming up this month, but on the day that we are actually recording, this is Palm Sunday in the Christian religion. And I have found it interesting when I think about Rizwan, and I think about the 12th day when Baha'u'llah is leaving Baghdad to go to Constantinople. The government had thought that this would be a disgrace for him because he was going to be being led out with a military escort. What appeared to have been something degrading turned out to be something wonderful. As you said, he rode out on a red roan. There were people lining the roads for miles to bid him farewell. And this was so magnificent. And so I tend to think, too, then of Palm Sunday, which is the day that Christ rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, and the people all put palm branches in his way for him to cross over, welcoming him into the town, because they were looking for the Savior and the Messiah. It just, to me, it just kind of connects. So I always think that's interesting. Next month, we will be talking more about Rizwan and Baha'u'llah's journeys in the New Lamp part of the program. So let's see here. Do we have other events coming up, do you know, over these next few weeks? Anybody?
Fireside is April 12th.
Tomorrow, on April 12th, There will be a fireside, which is a time that people are welcome to come and join us just to learn more about the Baha'i faith. On this particular Sunday, Lynn Laskowski will be our guest speaker. She has just returned from spending the winter in Australia and will be telling us about Baha'i activities there where she was visiting in Australia. We have Tuesday evening, there is always a prayer devotional time, which is led by Joan Mills. On Sunday mornings, there is a devotional time at 10:30. And on April 26th, those morning devotions will be followed by a potluck and game day, which is a good time, fun for all ages.
And we also, the Baha'is have a team in the Crop Walk on April 19th to raise money for people in need around the world.
Oh, thanks for mentioning that. I appreciate that. So, Marge, we are so glad that you have been with us today. You provided us with some really interesting stories and insights. So this has really been great, and we're glad that you've been with us. And we hope that as we go into our little devotional time, that you'll do some of the readings with us.
Okay, I would be honored to do that.
All right, that's great.
All right, thank you.
O Son of Glory, be swift in the path of holiness, and enter the heaven of communion with me. Cleanse thy heart with the burnish of the Spirit, and hasten to the court of the Most High. Baha'u'llah.
Blessed are the steadfastly enduring, they that are patient under ills and hardships, who lament not over anything that befalleth them, and who tread the path of resignation. Baha'u'llah.
Consort with the followers of all religions in a spirit of friendliness and fellowship. They that are endued with sincerity and faithfulness should associate with all the peoples and kindreds of the earth with joy and radiance, inasmuch as consorting with people hath promoted and will continue to promote unity and concord, which are in turn conducive to the maintenance of order in the world and to the regeneration of nations. Baha'u'llah.
There can be no doubt whatever that the peoples of the world, of whatever race or religion, derive their inspiration from one heavenly source and are the subjects of one God. Baha'u'llah.
What profit is there in agreeing that universal friendship is good and talking of the solidarity of the human race as a grand ideal? Unless these thoughts are translated into the world of action, they are useless. Abdu'l-Baha. To find out more about Baha'i events taking place in Champaign-Urbana, or if you'd like to listen to previous New Lamp programs, you can go online to www.cu-bahai.org. Or if you would like to learn more about the Baha'i national and international community, go to www.bahai.us. Thank you again for joining us today. I hope you'll join us again next month. Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this week's Weekend Heartbeat on WEFT Champaign 90.1 FM, Community Radio, Champaign-Urbana, Illinois, streaming live at www.weft.org.